I was born on Basilan Island in the Philippines in a lumber plantation. When I was a boy, my brother, who was also born there, used to terrorize me with a frightening ghost story. He told the story of 3 plantation wives whose heads were cut off by the Japanese occupiers in 1943. It was said that their ghosts would forever walk down a coral road, 3 pathetic figures, all hugging one another, reaching forward, trying to find their way. Years later, we moved to Wisconsin, and one day I was on my bicycle. Out in the country, I looked down a long road. I thought I saw them, the 3 headless plantation wives, reaching out, pathetically moving forward towards me. I was very frightened. 2 years later, I woke up in the middle of the night in my bedroom in Wisconsin, and I thought, if they were ghosts, how come they looked exactly like I imagined that they would look? From that moment on, I was never frightened of anything again.
My grandfather was a freshman at University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1933. And my grandfather, when he was younger, had super dark hair, super dark eyes, and very dark copper-colored skin. Now, in 1933, about 98% of the students were Nordic or Germanic looking, and so he kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. But he was dating my grandma at the time, who lived in New London, and he couldn't afford a car, so he used to hitchhike. Now granted, this was 1933, so it was pretty safe, but nobody would pick him up. Nobody would pick up the dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-skinned guy. But his best friend was a year older than he was, and he was a football player, and he was a letter winner. So his best friend, who weighed 250 pounds, said, "Hey, why don't I give you my Wisconsin Badger football letter jacket and you can wear it while you're hitchhiking, because everybody loves the Badgers. They love the Wisconsin Badgers." So my grandfather, who weighed 160 pounds, said, "Well, we could try." So my grandfather tries the jacket on. He's kind of swimming in it, but he says, what the heck. So as my grandfather would tell it, he walked out of his dorm and he said it was almost like in slow motion. He put his thumb up to get a hitch, to hitch a ride, and this husband and wife like screech on the brakes. They pick him up, he gets in the back seat, and the husband is looking at my grandfather from the rear view window or rear view mirror, and he's noticing my grandfather's hair and eyes and skin color and the small stature of him. And he asks, "What position do you play on the Wisconsin football team?" And my grandfather would always joke, "I'm the kicker." And then later on, when he would hitch again, he would make jokes like "I'm the kicking tee," which is this little tee that they would kick the football off of. So he had a great sense of humor, but he would end this story. He said, "I wish people would have seen me not for the color of my hair, the color of my eyes, or the color of my skin, or even see that giant red W for the Wisconsin football team, but that they would actually see me for the color of my soul." So that really hit home with me. And he was a great guy. He was one of my favorite guys of all time, and I absolutely love him, and I miss him still to this day.
I learned how to play the flute because in the 5th grade they were starting a school band and you could pick what instrument you wanted to play. So when I told my parents, they called my dad's cousin, Tuffy Epstein, and because he was a middle school music teacher, they asked him what instrument I should play. And he said the oboe, because then I will always have a place in the band since nobody wants to play the oboe. So I went to school and I told our music teacher, Mr. Music, no joke, silk shirts, gold chains, feathered hair, and I told him I wanted to play the oboe, and he scolded me and said, nobody starts on the oboe, you first have to play the flute. So I came home and I told my parents that, and my mom took me to the rental store where the man who was renting flutes told me there's no way I would ever be able to play the flute because my top lip is so fat. So I guess he was wrong.
There is so much out of our control. I act more empowered, confident, in control than I really am. It's the only way I have the life I have. Recently, I visited Maui. Along the road to Hana, there is a trail with multiple waterfalls. Deep within the bamboo forest, I climbed rocks and mud and reached for a rope, then launched myself from rock and dropped from rope to water. First, there is the fear of jumping. Then, once plunging beneath water's surface, there is the fear of not being able to pull myself back up and swim the 20 or so feet to where there is more than just more water beneath my feet. I was pregnant once. Twin girls. Their story is out of my control. I carried them inside of me for 23 weeks when their hearts stopped. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. People say nothing prepares you for raising children. I felt ready to give myself, my time, my energy, my love to these girls. Nothing prepares you for what it feels like to have two lifeless bodies fall out of your body and onto your hospital bed. I am acting most of the time. When I'm at the office in the role of payroll manager, I enter data, solve problems, cut checks. When I'm teaching yoga, I take on the role of a distant yet compassionate caregiver, never divulging too much about my own personal life or struggles. We all have stories. When I'm modeling, I take on the role of a woman confident enough in her own skin to disrobe for the sake of helping artists hone their skills. I delivered Darling in May in 2014, the day after Thanksgiving. When my two younger sisters came into the room, they were crying and they didn't know what to do. There really is nothing to do. I hugged them, trying to comfort them with words I can't remember. I remember one of my sisters saying, "You shouldn't be comforting us, we should be comforting you." But who's to say what role one takes on in any given situation? The day after I delivered Darling in May, after I was released from the hospital, I visited with a friend at Starbucks. I felt beyond human, divine intervention, supernatural. This didn't last. There is so much out of my control, so I act in control. If I'm looking into your eyes, it is me controlling my own fear of being seen. So what's my role here? A type of disrobing, a little data entry, a distant storyteller. Once I thought I'd be a mom. Now I am but whatever the moment requires.
So I have my morning routine. I get up, I have my breakfast, I exercise, shower. Today I had a little interruption. After I got done exercising, I had a seizure. I went to this unconscious state of mind. And when I have these, I can't control when or how long they go on for. And I have them almost daily, but sometimes I just wonder why I have to go through this.
It was an entire residential neighborhood, not much different from this one, covering about 4 square miles near a major metropolitan area. It was developed in about the 1950s, and all the streets were laid out on a grid, just like the surrounding neighborhoods. There's nothing terribly exceptional about the place, except all of the houses were empty and everyone was long gone. Nobody lived there anymore. At night, all of the houses were dark because there was no electricity, and the street lights didn't come on anymore. The driveways were all empty. There was no traffic, no kids playing outside, no barbecues, no sound of lawnmowers and weed whackers buzzing and whirring in the middle of the day, no car alarms going off at 4 in the morning. Just the sound of the wind and the birds chirping. It was peaceful, like a cemetery, both calm and creepy. The trees and bushes were wild and untamed. They shrouded entire houses and rendered them practically invisible from the street. Vines grew up and around light poles and stop signs and mailboxes, up the sides of houses. Anywhere a vine could grow, it grew. Water leaked in through cracked roofs and seeped in through foundations, causing entire structures to rot and crumble. The earth was literally digesting everything it possibly could. I would walk the abandoned streets, wondering what the place was like when people were here, like an archaeologist from the distant future, trying to figure out the purpose of things like mailboxes and fire hydrants. There were memories everywhere. None of which were mine, but I was free to make stuff up. Like, there's a dilapidated kid's swing set that was once brand new. I bet some kid played on that thing for hours on end. You know, little Sarah knew that if she could build up enough momentum, she could swing around the top of that thing and blow everyone's minds. She'd be a local celebrity. I think about that place often, and I cannot say that I have ever been more fond of any other public safety hazard.
I remember my brother and I used to sit and talk about how we were gonna get our mom a house in the hills when we grow up. We were gonna be cool and talking about someday we're gonna be okay. Someday. 6th grade, shout out to my ELA teacher who let me know that it was different. In front of class, he let me know everything I was and everything I wasn't gonna be. Saying, someday you're gonna be just like the rest of your family. Nothing. Someday. So, self-fulfilling prophecy, ducking the law, fighting. I remember thinking, someday, this shit gonna catch up with me. Someday. We make it to graduation, make it to college. Mom, we made it. I leave my city, but not the habits. Thinking, oh man, I don't know how we're gonna make it out. Catch a cell, catch a felony. I remember thinking, someday, I'll get my shit together. Someday. I leave, I'm on probation, trying to figure out how to eat. Enter my son. I remember staring in his eyes thinking, Someday you're gonna be everything you're supposed to be and more. Someday. Start taking school seriously. Art shows and art sales. Moving to the top, I remember thinking, someday I could actually do something. Someday. Graduate college, life's reps hit hard. I know nothing about self-care, only self-destruction. I was thinking, someday it's all gonna crash and burn anyway, so fuck it. Someday. If I had to pick my face up, get it together for my family, enter my wife, my beautiful daughter, now I got a reason for being, a reason to fly, a reason for purpose. And I'm thinking, someday we're gonna do something good here. Someday. Which brings me here, now. I got a place to stand and a can of paint. And I'm hitting every wall. And I'll never forget where I came from. And I'm reaching back to bring you with me. Because our someday's today.
I think magic exists. I think we don't always have control over it. I think we're all a little bit magical. I think kids are especially magical and maybe unaware of their powers. One thing that people want to know usually when they meet me here in Wisconsin is like what brought me here. I grew up in Florida. I grew up in a tropical paradise. What made you want to move to Wisconsin? And that's sort of a complicated question. And I don't even know if it's a want. It's maybe magic. When I was a kid growing up in Florida, I was used to things like salt water, sand, condominiums, jellyfish, stingrays, you know, shark sightings, sharp things, hot things. You know, you walk out on a summer day in Florida and it's like opening a dryer mid-cycle. It's 95 degrees and just incredibly humid. When I came to Wisconsin as a kid, it felt exotic. The cool breeze, the pine-scented air, it felt otherworldly, really. And going to summer camp, you know, you have all those feel-good feelings, singing around the campfire, bonding with your friends, and that combined with the weather and this like relative feeling that there wasn't like peril around every corner, kind of made me fall in love with it, kind of made me feel like it was a magical place. And so, you know, maybe it was a magical place. At the summer camp I went to, we had a wishing tree, which was like 2 trees that were connected at the base. It was sort of a V. And it was said that wishes made there would come true. And this was a very repetitive thing. We would walk through the wishing trees and put one hand on one tree, one hand on the other tree, and then ground ourselves with our left foot, pick up the right foot, close our eyes, and make our wish. Now, most of the time we were wishing for things like, you know, a rain-free cookout or passing into the next level of an activity. But I know for a fact that more than once, I probably wished to stay at camp forever. I maybe wished that I would grow up and live in Wisconsin. This is an 8-year-old feeling a strong connection to a place and repeatedly going through a magic tree and making a magical wish. Now, that 8-year-old did not know that she was completely derailing the life of her future 37-year-old self. However, when people ask me how I ended up in Wisconsin after growing up in Florida, the only thing that comes to mind is it must have been the wishing tree.
I don't remember how old I was. Older than 2, but younger than 5. My grandmother's house is in the country, Highway 57. The gravel driveway comes 1/8 of a mile up into their fields and takes a quick left turn next to a short sidewalk that leads up to their front door. There, on the stoop, at the end of the sidewalk, he sits, playing his guitar. I'm walking up behind him. Other than a quick memory of a flash of a memory where my mother is throwing an ashtray at him, this will be my earliest memory of my father. I'll see him throughout the years. Summer visits and the occasional Christmas. Until I'm 12, when my mother remarries. I'll only see him a few times after that. He'll take me on the road with him, North Dakota to Louisiana and back. We'll play guitar together once. He'll make me laugh. He'll pray for me. I'm sure I sat down next to him that day on the sidewalk. I'm sure he talked with me or played me a tune. Maybe he put his arm around me and told me he was sorry for the way everything was turning out. I don't remember.
I went to Walmart on a busy day recently. The guy in front of me in the checkout line had his arms around a giant yellow pillow that said, "You are my sunshine." And when he got to the checkout, the cashier realized that it had a tiny rip in the corner. So she radioed a teenager in a blue vest. Teenager came up. Teenager ambled off to the pillow section to track down a replacement. A little annoying, but I wasn't in a hurry. I took some deep breaths, but I could hear a kerfuffle coming from behind me where a man was punching out a text on his phone and swearing under his breath. So I took the opportunity to get really annoyed at him. Then it was my turn. And the whole time that the cashier was ringing up my stuff, I was just filling with righteous indignation at this guy behind me. I was thinking about what kind of car he drives, probably a giant truck, the kind that's always revving its engines around my house lately. I was thinking about who he voted for and how he probably treats his wife. But I didn't actually look at him until it was almost time to go. I was planning on turning and giving him one last, "You are what's wrong with the world today" kind of glare. But when I turned, he smiled at me. Not a big smile. He smiled "I know I'm being a jerk, but I've sent up an emergency flare to the better angels of my nature" kind of smile. And that was all it took to completely change that situation, like a tiny crack that lets a lot of light in. I realized he looked a little bit like a sweet kid I went to high school with. He looked like some of the men who coach my kids' baseball teams. He looked like a whole complicated person. And I'm still trying to work out how to make that happen a little more often as I go about my days. How to open the door, just a little.